if you're doing a launch, right? Or as you're hiring, it's like, what is
Mm.
the energy? What is the spirit? What is the pattern that you're bringing to that hiring, to
Yep.
that, to that launch? I mean, to me, this is where it's like the blessing and the curse of being a business owner, especially a conscious one, is like, oh, you'll have a lot to pay attention to.
Business is about more than therapy. Let's talk about how to not create trauma in your own business. That is going to be our topic for today here on More Than Therapy. And I have a great guest for you. Let me bring her up. So, for today, we are going to have a really deep conversation, not just on how to not create trauma in your business, but also on what it means to have good business practices in place in order to not do that. And we're going to have this conversation with Annie Wright, LMFT, and she is the founder of Evergreen Counseling right in the Bay Area, right?
Correct. Yes.
Yes. So let's talk a little bit first about your story. Like how did your experience, how did you get to this, successful group practice owner? And then let's talk after that about what's going on. And
I'm so excited to be here with you, and I'm so happy we're talking about all of these wonderful, juicy things. So thank you for having me.
you're
Um,
welcome.
sure. Well, by way of introduction, I'll start off by saying I'm sort of the penultimate example of what's professional is personal. I came to be a
Mm,
trauma therapist because of my own work recovering from a relational trauma history, childhood abuse, childhood neglect. I did not know that at the time. It all caught up with me in the 20s. And when I experienced
mm,
pretty profound effects of going into therapy and starting to work on my past and recover from the trauma, that's when I knew, gosh, I want to do this myself. Like this is a way to make meaning of my past, and also it felt like the most meaningful and fulfilling career choice I could make. So
mm,
becoming a clinician, I did decide to scope down and focus really on relational trauma recovery. And that's what I'm known for. So, relational trauma recovery, I do my best work in the world with those who were raised by mood or personality disordered parents, as I was. And
mm,
I'm still a practicing clinician today. It, I do specialize in EMDR therapy as well. It's sort of the power tool in my clinical toolbox to treat relational trauma. And we can talk more about that certainly.
yes.
Fun. Yeah. So, and then in 2019, so I've been a clinician for quite some time. I've been a mental health writer, publishing every 2 weeks on my own blog since, gosh, spring of 2015. I launched and created my own online course with that focuses on my content area of expertise. And then in
Mhm.
February 2019, so 4 years ago, when my daughter was 3 months old, I launched a therapy center called Evergreen Counseling, which is a boutique trauma informed therapy center located here in Berkeley, the heart of the Bay Area, but serving clients all over California. Today, I have
Mm.
a team of 22 W 2 staff members, including 18 trauma trained clinicians. And I myself am still a practicing clinician within the center, and I have 4 members of an operational team. So I've got a pretty dynamic, busy, full career, and every piece of my work in the world revolves around helping those who come from adverse childhoods have beautiful adulthoods despite those adverse early days.
Mm. Oh my God, I love how you said that. That was so good. Yeah. Yeah. You start with that adverse childhood, but that doesn't mean you can't have a beautiful adulthood. You
Um,
just need a guide, right? To move you through that journey so you can get to the other side.
yeah,
Ooh,
yeah.
that is so good. Yeah.
It's a privilege
So
to be that guide for a lot of people. I love that.
You're right. Yes. So you gave us so much to work with right there. Okay. So some of what you talked about, what that I want to go back to is I call it like an alternative healing modality, right? You have your talk therapy in your toolbox, but you also have EMDR. And I like to say that kind of accelerates the healing or give
Yeah.
another space to help the healing happen. But then you also talked about having a group practice and you named some numbers like you 18, 22. What was the numbers?
Currently, I have 18 clinicians who work for me and 4 operational team members.
Right. And then you, for our pre-conversation, you also are continuing to hire, right?
Oh, yeah.
You're not staying there, right? So then
No,
you're also growing, and then
yes.
you are also taking on clients,
Uh-huh.
and you have,
Yeah.
of course, right, multiple streams of revenue. And
Yes, I do.
then you also have your blog.
Yes, yeah.
So you talk
And a
about more than therapy, right?
4-year-old and a 4-year-old daughter, so I'm
And
busy.
a 4-year-old. Yes. So
Yeah.
that is the true definition of what we plan to talk about here on More Than Therapy. So if we break that down,
Mhm.
what I feel is most pertinent to our original conversation, how to not create trauma in your own business. I
Oh,
think some of talking about that is the team, because the easiest way to create trauma in your business is to attract those old people, attract your sister, attract your mother, attract, right? You, and next thing you know, your employees replicate your family.
I mean, that is definitely one way to replicate and reenact your childhood trauma without a doubt. I mean, I'm happy to
Yeah.
talk a little bit more about that. I actually have not had that experience, luckily. I don't attract.
Because you did your work.
I did a lot of work, but there is still work to be done, as we were talking
Absolutely.
about in the pre-show, because, the way that the thing that I have learned, running a really big business, a multi seven-figure business is this. I mean, who we are is the culture that happens in a small business. Now, it's a little different when you get
Mm,
that sort of $5 million to $10 million range and you've actively invested in changing the culture and have a very large operations team. But when you're still a small business, anywhere from, 1 to 5 million,
mhm,
you as the founder really set
mhm,
the tone. And so while I haven't necessarily attracted operational team members that are anything like my family of origin, what I've certainly watched happen, and happen even recently, as you and I were talking about, is some of my unresolved trauma around scarcity, fear, urgency
mm.
play out and impact my team members. So I'm
Yep.
actually, at the time of this recording, taking a really hard look at some of these patterns that I thought I was done with. But it's like, when we face the same content again and again at higher levels of awareness. So that's another way that I have personally experienced, replicating trauma within the business. And I think it's just, we're going to do that in a lot of different ways. And it's the curiosity and the consciousness that we bring to what we're doing in our businesses that really
Yep.
count. It's
Yeah.
unavoidable to recreate it. It's just how curious and conscious can you be of it?
Yes. And I was sharing with you my story. That was me. I was hiring my sister, my brother, my mother, my
So interesting. So interesting. Right. There's a lot of different ways it can look, right?
Yes. And when you look at it and you see what you've created, and then I could blame, those employees, but I know I attracted that. I know I created
Yeah.
that because deep down in my soul, even though I work as a therapist, what I really want to do is heal my family. Right.
Oh, yeah.
That's why I became a therapist. So
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, let's have a really healthy family. That's my goal in life. But since that wasn't really happening, I was like, okay, well, let me just help the world, right? Maybe other people can have
Sure.
healthy families. And then
Sure.
through that, though, yeah, and the great thing about it though is really you can't change anybody. They kind of live by through your example. So as you create the healing space for other people, then your family sees that and they're like, "Oh wow, I want some of that." You're like, "Oh great, here you go." So and
Mhm.
they may not do it exactly the way you want them to do it, but it happens, and that is all that matters.
I love that you're talking about, like, the power of modeling. Like, what is the impact we have when we do our own personal work? And I think that can absolutely show up and impact our family of origin, and I think it can show up and impact our employees as well. The more we do our own work, the more we have the chance to positively impact others.
Yeah, absolutely. So you talked about having a large practice, continuing
Mhm.
to hire, but
Yes.
still seeing some of your old patterns come up, and you are taking responsibility and looking at how you can not replicate that in the future. So, what do you see as having a multi seven figure business, your next level of success? Do you feel like there's some place for you to go next, or do you feel like, okay, let's hold here? Where do you feel like you're going next, even having discovered what you created already?
Well, it's not so much what do I feel I'm going to do next, it's what I know I'm going to do next. So
Oh,
I do
excuse
plan on
me.
no, it's okay. I have very clear growth goals. No, I do intend to double the size of the center and get us up to 30 clinicians. That to me feels like a sweet spot. I've never wanted to be like one of the venture capital backed big
Mm,
tech pro mental health companies. That's not what I want. What I want is
yeah.
a very excellent boutique experience of high-end trauma clinicians. And so we're tracking towards that. But I think the more interesting question for me, at least, is it's not so much like, will we get there? It's like, yes, of course we will get there. But the how will we get there is the thing that I'm really focused on. Because again, in my own personal story, the how has always been as a lone wolf, grinding,
Mm,
working myself into exhaustion, working round the clock, like not relying on others, just muscling through.
yep.
Now, that did get me to a certain level of academic, professional, financial success in the world. It is also not sustainable, and it's not
Yep.
sustainable for my staff either. And so, what I'm really curious about right now, both personally and professionally, is can you have success while having really realistic, well-paced goals where everyone's boundaries
Mm,
and requirements are accounted for, where everyone is getting their needs met, including the founder not working herself, through the
yep.
weekends and in the early mornings. So I think it's a question of like, can we be both successful, really well rested, really well nourished, really well taken care of? And that, frankly, is not something I've experienced before in my life. So that's a
Mhm.
new privilege for me. And I happen to have an extraordinary team that works alongside me. I love my operations team so much. And we're all in it together, right?
Yep.
Like we have a very deep, close relationship, and we're taking a look at this together. And that
Yeah.
feels almost like business therapy in a way.
Exactly. I was going to say that that's exactly what we do at Presidential Lifestyle because financial therapy is about that. So in the Financial Therapy Club, we work a lot with private
Oh,
practice business owners who are looking at that like either or thinking, right? Because what you just
yeah.
described is what we call either or thinking.
Yeah.
And you said, can you, where you corrected my language, I'm correcting your language. And like, it's more like, how do you? Because yes, you
Exactly.
can. I know you can. And I've worked with people to get them there, but it's how do you? And what's so beautiful about it is that we all have our own formula for what that will look like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I'm not sure if folks in financial therapy experience this, but it's kind of like for me, it has felt like asking a fish how's the water. Well, if water is the only thing the fish has ever known, it's like, what's it going to know differently, right? It's like it hasn't had the contrast of air or land or anything like that. And so when my team questions like, Annie, we can get there and we can do it in a way that's more sustainable and that isn't so
Mhm.
fear-based or urgency-based. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? What? Like, I'm literally trying to learn this, and it
Yep.
feels a little silly to say, but I don't know if you've experienced this, but for me, nothing will bring up my own personal work more than running a business. I mean, I've
Mhm.
been with my husband for 12 years. I have a child. Like, yes, lots of personal growth through both of those relationships, lots of personal growth in therapy. But where the rubber has really hit the road for me is in running a business. It will bring up,
Mhm.
it has and continues to bring up so much material for me to look at and heal and to work through. And I don't know if that's
Yeah.
been the case for you too.
Yes, and not only for me, but almost all of the people that I work with, that's where it shows up the most for them.
Yeah.
I would say for me, the reason why it shows up so much for me is because similar to you, I had the hard work mentality, but I am helping people
Yeah.
create that harmony in their lives. So I have to practice what I preach. And that is our core. We have four core values, and that is our second core value, which is practice what you preach. And the first one is
Oh,
do your own work. So I noticed that it comes up more when I put my head down and go into the business and I'm not doing my work because the work is constant. Right. So
yes.
if I get distracted by the business, because maybe there's a big launch or, we're bringing on, new people and I'm like, well, let's just onboard people. And, oh, I can forget that for this week. I'll do it next week. And then next thing I know, it doesn't happen next week. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, shoot, it's been 4 weeks and I haven't done my self care. Right. So,
Totally. Totally.
yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's certainly one way that we can see our patterns through our businesses. And then I would even say, like, if you're doing a launch, right, or as you're hiring, it's like, what is
Mhm.
the energy? What is the spirit? What is the pattern that you're bringing to that hiring, to
Yep.
that, to that launch? I mean, to me, this is where it's like the blessing and the curse of being a business owner, especially a conscious one, is like, oh, you'll have a lot to pay attention to as you move
Ooh,
through this.
and you just said it, a conscious business owner. Let's go there.
Sure,
Yes,
sure.
let's take that a little bit deeper. So, when you say a conscious business owner, tell me more about that.
Well, sure. I guess one of the things I think about is like, if a staff member came to me and said, I am feeling so burned out by the urgent sort of DEFCON 5 culture that we have here on the team, there's like a couple of choices. You could be the kind of leader who's like, you're not the right person for the team then, right? And like fire and find somebody who can tolerate that environment. Or you can be a person who maybe a kind of business owner who's like, wow, you're an A player, you're a star player, and I care about you deeply. If you're giving me that feedback, and if I've heard that feedback from others, there's probably something here I should pay attention to.
Mhm.
What can we do? What can I do to address this for my team to preserve their well-being while still making sure we hit our goals, right? Like
Yes.
that to me is the difference. Somebody who doesn't just say, well, you're the problem, right? Let's replace you
Yep.
versus somebody who's willing to get curious. And I would say, too, operate in a non patriarchal framework where it
Mhm.
does take into account the other and the other's experience and
Yep.
values it, right? And places
Yeah.
profits a lot of times.
Yes. Yep. That's so good because what I am hearing, what I heard you say is that you're listening, right? It's like you're not just always the one talking and ruling and tyrannical over the business. You're listening.
Right,
Mhm.
and being willing to be influenced by the other, right? I mean, we can think about this with a marriage or a friendship. It's like if one person gets to dictate the terms, that's not a relationship, that's a dictatorship, right?
Mhm.
So, who is a conscious leader? Well, one who is maybe willing to be influenced by the other in their business and to
Yep.
not necessarily say it's my way or else, but to rather account for the differences in temperament and personality and
Yep.
lifestyle preferences and be willing to be influenced by messages you hear, not to necessarily be the scapegoat of your own business, but rather
Yeah.
to be curious about your work, the way you're contributing, and to see if there's some sort of collective effort that can be made that gets everyone's needs met.
Yeah, and there has to be somebody in the business besides you that you trust
Yeah.
because if you're not listening, if you're not willing to take the feedback, then they're really what you're saying is that you don't trust your team members.
Correct, and I happen to, I love my clinicians dearly, and the people I'm in the most contact with are my operations team, and I happen to love each one of them very, very much as a person and trust them all implicitly. So I
Mm,
feel like I've created a kind of work family and work culture where that trust exists, and when that trust exists and the container is strong enough, a lot of this work can take place, right? Like,
mm,
a lot feedback can be said, hard things can be discussed, emotions can come up as well as tactics if the container is strong enough. And that's
yeah.
how I operate in running my businesses.
Yeah, and that's so powerful that you say that because the we run therapy businesses and the therapy is happening even inside us.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
joking with my center's practice manager earlier today. I'm like, oh, we have a business therapy relationship. You know, she's such an agent of my own personal change work and certainly me for her. It's really beautiful. And it's atypical, I would say. This is not corporate America at all. This is very much heart-centered, but also rigorous
Mhm.
and business ownership.
Yep. So you said that you were clear and you know where the business is going. I
Yeah.
want to talk to you a little bit about the challenge to get there.
Oh,
So
yeah.
we talk about five most common challenges. You tell me if you have one of these or if it's something else. So we often talk about technology, like not utilizing technology enough, not having the right marketing messaging or
Mhm.
operations, which you have. It sounds like you have a strong operations team. Finances, like not looking at the numbers, don't know where the money is coming in or how fast it's going out. And then the last one we talk about a lot is values, not really having a clear vision and value system in the business. So
Mhm.
do you think you have any challenges with those, or is it something else that might be a block to getting to that next level?
Well, I mean, that's a really great question. I mean, I love what you identified. I would say there are sort of two things. One is loosely what you spoke about with regards to marketing. And certainly, I'm not sure when our conversation will be airing, but right now we are in the midst of a very big website launch where I've articulated our center's brand positioning, our niche,
Mhm.
our values more clearly than ever before. I'm actually really excited to see what happens after that comes out into the world, to see if that actually helps sort of fulfill a bit of a marketing gap that we've had historically.
Mm.
People really understanding who we are and being attracted to us because of who we are.
Yep.
Similarly, clinician candidates.
Oh,
But I,
yeah. Mhm.
I
Great
would,
point.
yeah, so there's twin pillars in a therapy center. It's like you want to attract the clients, of course, but you also want to attract the right kind of staff members as well. So
Yep.
marketing messaging is critical and integral to both of those things. It's interesting. I would actually say that the biggest barrier to growth that I foresee right now is not any of the five that you mentioned, but rather it's a six, which is being willing and able to make the right kind of investments to facilitate that next
Mm.
stage of growth. I've been thinking about it as foundationing for a different level. And
Yep.
as somebody who grew up extremely poor and who was the first in her family to go to college, certainly very much self-made, and I can say that we lived in poverty for a portion of my childhood. My relationship to money and making investments back into my company has
Mhm.
or either of my companies has always been a bit of a barrier for me because of deeply rooted scarcity beliefs. Like, have to cling on
Yep.
to every penny because there won't be more coming, and you'll end up on the street, um, which is not the case. And and yet, I still watch myself not make hires until maybe I don't want to say until it's too late, but definitely longer than it should.
Yeah.
I actually think for me, there's mindset work and strategic hires, as well as investing more into the culture of the business that will help get us to that next level of growth. So
Yeah.
those are the three things I'm primarily focused on. I know my numbers really well. Our
But
operations
that
are
still falls under finance. That still falls under our
really
finance.
good. Yeah. So that
Yeah.
that that mindset work, finances, investments, you're correct. So maybe that does really
Yeah.
fit there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And but that is such great insight because just knowing that allows you to either get a guide that helps you in that area or tell your team or hire somebody around you that's going to
Yes.
help you. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Hmm.
which I did. Yeah. I was like, okay, I need some help. And so I hired someone. She's really extraordinary, and she's providing me with the tools and the coaching to understand like financial forecasting and timelines for investments and things that show me the black and white data to help soothe that sort of young, scared part of me. So,
Yes.
like I said, your personal work is just always coming up. Always coming up in the business.
I know. And I was so glad you took out the time from what did I name? 7 different things that you have on your plate right now. So we are so grateful for this
Oh,
conversation because it's so pertinent. And I know so many people can benefit from just hearing it because there's somebody at 1 million who's like, I'll never get to the, 3 or 5 or whatever billion mark, or somebody at 100,000 that's like, I have no idea where to go next. And just
sure.
hearing your story lets them know that one, they're not alone, and two, that it's a process, right? Because that's what I heard you say.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
It is the process. I mean, I've been at all those numbers, right? And so
Right.
that, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. I remember that. And the thing is, it's like the same stuff comes up at every single level. It
Yep.
just comes up in a bigger way with different levels of awareness and possibly different tools to deal with it.
Yep.
And so one of the things I always say is like, don't become a business owner if you don't like solving problems all the time, because it's not like we get to a certain
Mhm.
number, like even this mythical seven figures or multi seven figures, the problems still keep coming. Like if you
Yep.
don't like solving problems, if you don't feel passion and mission for your business, it's a lot of work. Uh,
Yep.
but it has the opportunity to be really, really transformative on a personal level too.
Yes. Yep.
Really
And so
interesting.
many, yeah, so many levels. It's like it transforms you and just like the meaning that life has for you. But it sounds like it's also transforming you. Like you wouldn't get a lot of this, the work wouldn't happen as fast, right? Maybe when you were 60, 70, you'd be like, oh, all these, lessons I've learned. But because you own a business, you're like, bam, bam, learn it, learn it, learn it, learn it.
Whether I like it or not some mornings. Goodness gracious. Yeah,
Exactly.
kind of like the sort of like the black belt route here, sometimes.
Yes.
Um and I wouldn't have it any other way because I'm never ever bored and this is what I signed up for. And I love what I do. I love what I do.
Yes. So we always put in the description of the videos how to reach out to you, but you can tell us. I know you said you have a new website, so you can tell us what your new website is, but people will be able to click on it in the description. But tell us about your new website. You also talked about a course, and I know we don't have a lot more time, but if you want to talk a little bit about your course and then tell people how they can reach you.
Definitely, definitely. So I'm definitely a multi hyphenate in terms of a career, in terms of all the things I do. So there's a couple places to find me online. There's my primary website, anniewright.com. That's where you'll get to experience my mental health writing. You can certainly learn more about my clinical work, and you can also be taken to the link to my course, which is called Hard Families, Good Boundaries. Now, that is a psychoeducational online course that anyone can sign up for. It's on an evergreen funnel, and it's really designed to help people with very difficult, challenging people in their life, usually dysfunctional families of origin, learn how to cope with those relationships, set healthy boundaries, learn healthy communication skills, and more. It was a way that I packaged my work to expand beyond the borders of California to those who might need it. Because obviously, as a licensed mental health professional, I can only see clients in California. So,
Oh,
yes.
you gotta say more there.
Oh, okay.
So
Absolutely.
that is the number one thing that I get questions on. Well, I
Really?
would say number two, pricing is probably number one. And then number two is, well, how do I do that if I live in, in this state and I'm licensed in this state? So
Yeah.
talk about that.
Okay, well, then I think we have to talk about logistics because I am a
Okay.
rule follower. So
Mm,
I actually, when I keep referring to my companies, I have two companies. I have an LLC and I have my S Corp. My S Corp is Evergreen Counseling, which again, www.evergreencounseling.com is my therapy center. It's actually where and how I conduct my own clinical work because as a clinician licensed in California, I only see people in California. We do that at the center as well. So I run all of my clinical income, all of my clinical work through the S Corp. I set up a separate LLC because, again, I've been writing for a long time. I have 15,000 people on my mailing list, readers from all over the world. And a lot of people wanted to work with me, but I couldn't because they don't live in California and also maybe couldn't afford my fees as a therapist. So in summer 2020, I basically I created my first course. It's the only course I've ever created that was essentially I would not. It's basically a starter course. It's not the signature course that I ultimately
mhm,
intend to develop that has my entire relational trauma recovery framework, but it's more like a very hearty sample of my work that teaches people who come from, again, backgrounds where they were raised by mood or personality disordered parents or have a lot of family dysfunction to do
mhm.
that more effectively and to still and to do their own personal work. So I developed that course and run that through my LLC with very clear guidelines. This is not psychotherapy. I am not your
Mhm,
therapist. I am a teacher. This is psychoeducational in nature
mhm.
only. And so that's a very important logistical issue that people need to consider. If you are a clinician with a mental health
Yeah.
license, keep that completely separate from anything you do in terms of courses, etc. Maybe even consider setting up a separate business structure for it.
Yeah.
Sure, it's more work to, file a couple different returns for taxes, etc. But it's a lot cleaner and it's a way that you can start to package your expertise and reach more people more broadly. So I
Yeah.
had a wonderful experience with it. I think over 150 students globally have gone through the course at this point. Um,
Mm.
and I have plans for a lot more too at some juncture.
Yeah. And it's so beautiful though. 'Cause I like that you started with I'm a rule follower, right?
Oh yeah.
Because
Yeah.
the people who are listening who have that objection, they are rule followers. That's why they're saying, I don't think I can do this. And so to hear it from somebody just like them.
Yeah. I'm afraid of getting in trouble. Let's just be clear. Like I had, lawyers go over my contracts, my disclaimers, like all of the things, right?
Mhm.
So I think there's a way as therapists, we have the capacity and the potentiality to do some really extraordinary creative work in the world beyond the scope of our clinical license. And the challenge is finding sort of the legal structures or the legal details that you need to have in place in order
Yep.
to do that legally and ethically. And yet it's not insurmountable. It really isn't.
Yep, exactly. And what you're describing is something that takes a choice. Like, you have to make a choice, right? I'm going to make a choice to do this the right way because I really want to do it, first of all. So you're
Yeah.
talking to two different people. The
Yeah.
people who are the rebels, who are like, I'm just going to do it anyway, and who cares, right? They're hearing you saying, okay, there is some, it's an easy way to follow the rules. It takes a little extra step, but
It
it
does.
is not that hard. Then,
Well, yeah. Yeah.
then
I
the people who
if you paid that much money for your graduate degree and worked that hard for your license, I'd want you to protect it.
exactly, right. And right before you, our last conversation was with an intellectual property attorney. And one of the
Fascinating.
things she talked about is that she wouldn't really make a living if she was just like doing the prevention stuff, putting things in place for clinicians or whoever, business owners overall. She makes a living helping them fix their mistakes.
Ooh. Ooh, interesting.
I know, right?
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to listen to that recording. That'll be really cool.
Yeah, I'll send it to you when we get done. But it's so funny that's the perspective. It's like, if you just do these things up front, you put a few things in place up front, you can protect yourself down the line. And because you just don't know what that is down the line, at least just do the extra step to put the thing in place. You don't want to know. You
You
don't want
know,
to know.
I just consider it foundationing for a different level. And sometimes foundationing means more work and less money up front. But once you have that foundation in place
Mhm.
to build upon, boy, you can feel good about that sound structure.
Yep, exactly. And that's where we leave you, right there. Thank you
Oh,
so much. I got so much out of this, so I know everybody else did too. So
oh,
thank you for all the insight.
you are so welcome. I am delighted. I could literally talk to you for another hour. This was
Me
so
too.
much fun, and you touched on literally all of my favorite topics. So thank
Oh,
you so
good.
much for having me.
You're welcome. I'm so glad we had this conversation. We'll definitely have to have more.
Yeah.
And I'll make sure we put in the description of this video how people can reach out, find your course, but also just find out more about you, because we have listeners that are therapists and private practice business owners. But I'm sure that our viewers will also, because I think that therapists can benefit from seeing what you did just by following it, right? Just click on, take your course, see what you did. And the best way to get some experience is to experience it.
I would love that. I would love that.
Yeah.
Please consider me a model, poke around on my website, test things out, see how I've done it. I'm not saying it's the best, but it's a way of doing it. And I'd welcome
Mhm.
anybody coming over and just kind of perusing around.
But that's even more reason, because if they can see like, oh, there was a little thing here and that, oh, this, I
Oh,
can do this, right? It's like, it's not
sure.
about being perfect, which in the therapeutic industry.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No,
Right.
no. And I think, a piece that I'm aware of too is when I started doing all this back in spring 2015. I mean, my supervisors thought the BBS was going to come after me. They didn't want me to be the horror story. Like, to be
Mhm.
a therapist with a lot of creative impulses and a lot of creative product in the world is still
Yeah.
relatively new, even in
Yeah.
2023. And
Yeah.
so, if I can serve as a model to other clinicians of like how you might be able to do this, both your clinical work, run a, form a center, have a workshop, like be published in press and media, by all means, I'm happy to be an example.
Yes, thank you for being a good example. And I will talk with you very soon to see how the growth is going. And I'm so proud of you.
Thank you so much. That means a lot to me. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, guys. Thank you guys for staying all the way to the end, soaking up this juicy wisdom. We will see you next week.